The NBA playoffs start today, and I wouldn't be an NBA YouTuber if I didn't drop a predictions video. So today, let's go through the first round matchups of the Eastern and Western Conference. But before we get started, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe as we are on the road to 500 subscribers. It would be greatly appreciated and help recommend this channel to NBA fans like you. So leave a like and subscribe, and let's start out west with the 1-8 matchup between the OKC Thunder and New Orleans Pelicans. The young Thunder are making their first playoff appearance with this new core, and they've been extremely good on both sides of the ball, as it's only them and the Celtics that have both a top 5 offensive and defensive rating. And they're coming into the postseason hot as the winners of 5 games in a row. Luckily for them, they've drawn the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that feels incomplete without Zion on the court. What's going to save New Orleans in their pursuit of the second round is their depth, as guys like Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall, and Jose Alvarado will be getting more minutes and potentially cause havoc to a young, inexperienced team like the Thunder. What I'm curious about is Brandon Ingram's impact as the clear-cut number 1 option, because he could absolutely take over a game with his elite scoring abilities, but he can also put up performances similar to his game versus the Lakers, where he's so bad that he gets benched in crunch time. If New Orleans were fully healthy, I could easily see the Pelicans pushing this series to at least 6 games and making the Thunder sweat just a little bit. But this is still the Thunder we're talking about here, and while they're inexperienced, they played at a level high enough during the regular season to edge out the defending champs for the 1 seed. And if Shea can extend his magical regular season to the postseason, the Thunder could very easily make it deep into May. As for my prediction, I don't think the Pelicans have much of a chance without Zion, and the Thunder showed me nothing in the regular season to make me doubt them. So for that reason, I'm going with the Thunder to win this series in 5 games. Now let's shift our focus to the 4-5 matchup that everyone's been waiting for, the LA Clippers versus the Dallas Mavericks. These two teams have played in the first round in 3 of the last 5 years, with the Clippers getting the upper hand both times. But with the addition of Kyrie Irving and Luka somehow upping his play to another level, the Mavericks are one of the scariest teams out west. Now this series will all depend on the health of Kawhi Leonard, as Leonard is dealing with right knee inflammation in the same knee that underwent surgeries due to a torn ACL and meniscus. We obviously know how great of a playoff performer Kawhi is, and if he's out for Game 1, the Mavericks could easily go into LA and steal momentum. But the Mavericks would still have a tough task ahead of them in guarding dynamic scorers like Paul George and James Harden in the starting lineup, and Norman Powell and Russell Westbrook off the bench. The Mavericks are statistically in the bottom half of defensive metrics, and in a series where Dallas needs Luka and Kyrie to perform offensively, it feels fair to assume that their load defensively will be given to the role players around them, which in theory is fine. But when the surrounding pieces are Tim Hardaway Jr., PJ Washington, and Derrick Jones Jr., I have my concerns about when they're guarding George and Harden. But even if they play serviceable defense, which I think they can try to do at the very least, what this series is going to come down to is if the Mavericks can play their style of basketball. The Mavs play an extremely fast tempo and like to maximize the amount of possessions they have in a game, which means they don't hold on to the ball a lot and take a large amount of their shots with 7 to 15 seconds left on the shot clock, and they actually take the least amount of shots in the league with 0 to 4 seconds left on the shot clock. Meanwhile, the Clippers play one of the slowest paces in the league, and as a result, hold on to the ball a little longer, as evidenced by the fact that they have the 3rd highest rate of taking shots with 0 to 4 seconds left on the shot clock. The thing that may swing this series is that if the Mavericks are taking quick shots and scoring at a fast rate, the Clippers may not have the ability to keep up with them. This series is definitely one of the harder to predict, because as high-powered as the Mavericks offense is, the Clippers have playoff experienced stars who knows what it takes to win a close game. But because the Mavericks are trending upwards and the Clippers are trending downwards, I'm going with the Mavericks to win this series in 7 games. Next, let's take a look at the 6th-seeded Phoenix Suns traveling to Minnesota to take on the Timberwolves. Now this series is becoming ever more challenging to pick as the days go by, as while the Timberwolves are, in my opinion, the better team, the Suns just seem to have their number. And while many other teams in their series haven't played one another since 2023 and early 2024, the Suns and Timberwolves actually played twice in April, with the Suns getting the win both times. Before the playoffs, I said to myself that I would pick against the Suns in any series they're in, because since the All-Star break, they've been extremely inconsistent and underwhelming. But the one team, and maybe the only team, I think they could beat in a 7-game series in the West are the Timberwolves, because for some reason, the Suns find a way to neutralize the Timberwolves' top-ranked defense and go on long scoring runs headlined by the big three of Booker, Beal, and Durant. And if they all play at the level they've shown the ability to, the Suns could very easily take care of business in 5 or 6 games. But then there's one factor that could easily turn the tide for the Timberwolves, and that's Anthony Edwards. Edwards has had a breakout season in every way possible, going from a player who showed all-star potential to becoming an All-NBA second-team player who can carry the load on offense. And while the Suns swept the season series 3-0, what the Timberwolves were desperately missing was Edwards' scoring outbursts, as he averaged only 14 points a game, shooting 31% from the field versus Phoenix. So if Edwards can get it going on offense, and the defense can find a way to slow down at least one of the big three, this series will be extremely winnable for Minnesota. And that's what makes this series so hard to predict. It could truly go either way on any given night, but if I had to pick, I think I'm going with Phoenix to win this series in 6 games. To close out the Western Conference is a highly anticipated rematch between the 7th-seeded Lakers and 2nd-seeded Suns. Now the easy route here is to take the Nuggets in 5 and call it a day, as Denver has won I think 8 in a row versus the Lakers, and they have the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. It's a simple prediction, and truthfully I wouldn't blame you for making it, but I think it goes a little deeper than that. See, I'm not the biggest Lakers fan. In fact, I'm probably closer to being considered a Lakers hater, but I truly think the Lakers will push this series to at least 6 games. If you take a look at the Nuggets' wins over LA, Denver needed heroic efforts from almost everyone to take them down. And with D'Angelo Russell playing incredibly recently, and LeBron and AD still playing at an elite level, it could be tough for Denver to contain them offensively. The key to this series for both sides is Jamal Murray. We all know that All-NBA caliber talent in this series is going to put up ridiculous stat lines. But Murray on any given night can easily play like a top 15 player in this league and score at will. For the Nuggets to win this series, they need Murray to play as he did last year in the playoffs. And if he can't, that, along with some inexperience near the end of the bench, could ultimately be Denver's demise. I might sound crazy for saying the Lakers could very easily win this series, but I'm not crazy enough to pick them. I mean, when you have the best player in the world on your team and a supporting cast full of great shooters and defenders, you would have to show me a sign of weakness in the regular season for me to pick against you. And while the Nuggets certainly have their share of subpar performances, you can't pick against the defending champs, especially when the majority of the rotation was part of that title team. So I'm ultimately going to predict that LA comes out hot in this series, and Denver ultimately cools them off and finishes the job in 6 games. Now let's move over to the Eastern Conference, where the dominant first-seeded Boston Celtics will be taking on the 8th-seed Miami Heat in a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this series, and I'm not going to overcomplicate this process. I just think the Celtics are so dominant and well-rounded that no team will be able to take more than 2 games off them until the NBA Finals. The storyline near the end of the series will of course be Jimmy Butler's health, and if the Heat could take a game off Boston, maybe they could ruffle some feathers in the Celtics camp. But honestly, I don't think it would matter if Jimmy were healthy or not. I would still go with Boston to win this series in 5 games. Next up is the 5th-seeded Orlando Magic taking on the 4th-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers. Before we get into the analysis, let me say that I love the playoffs and I'll still watch every game from this series, but I don't think the NBA could have crafted a less watchable series if they tried. It's 2 teams whose focus is on defense, and honestly, I prefer that over seeing 2 teams who have a high-powered offense. But both teams have a tendency to go cold on offense, especially in the clutch, and it may make for some clumsy finishes to these games. However, the thing that makes this series worth watching is Paolo Banchero's playoff debut. Banchero is quietly making a case to become the American face of basketball in just a couple of years. And with this game kicking off the slate on Saturday, Banchero has a chance to captivate the national TV audience that rarely sees Magic games. But on the other side of the floor stand the Cleveland Cavaliers and Donovan Mitchell, whose playoff resume pre-Cleveland could go toe-to-toe with almost any young star in this league. I'm extremely curious to see how the Cavs look in Game 1, because I truly think it could determine the outcome of this series and either light a fire with a good performance or make the lights too bright with a bad performance. And while we know that Mitchell will show out, I'm curious how Mobley and Allen respond after last year's disaster. The key to this series is the pace versus pace battle. Both teams are in the bottom 6 of pace in the NBA and like to take their time when they have the ball. This means that whichever team jumps out to a lead can feel comfortable knowing their opposition will have to play at a pace unfamiliar to them. And normally in situations like these, I would take the team with the best player, and that's the Cavs. But they've just looked so bad post All-Star break that I'm actually going with the Magic to win this series in 6 games. Now on to the lower side of the bracket, where the 6-seeded Pacers are traveling to Milwaukee to take on the Bucks, who may be without former MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo for the first couple of games this series. Now this is a matchup we've been waiting for since December when the Pacers sent the Bucks home in the in-season tournament. But since the last time these two teams faced, a lot has changed. First, let's talk about the Pacers, who added Pascal Siakam to an already loaded team that thrives on a fast pace and high-powered offense. Because of that, they score a ridiculous amount of points and can easily blow a team out the water in just the first quarter. Now that fast pace of course means that for every shot the Pacers take, they give up one. And when you're facing a team that has Damian Lillard on it, you would probably want to limit his possessions, not give him more. But in 2024, with Lillard playing the most inconsistent basketball of his career, there are a lot of questions about whether Dame time will appear in the playoffs as he has in the past. What the key to this series is going to be is the Bucks 3 through 6 that consists of Middleton, Lopez, Portis, and Beasley. If Giannis is ultimately healthy, we know what we're going to get out of the first option. And while Dame hasn't been great this season, I'm a believer that he can turn it around in the playoffs. What concerns me about Milwaukee is their pieces after that top 2, as they could very easily cause this team to win or lose a game with some bad shooting nights. But ever since Doc took over, while their defense is much improved, their offense has gotten worse. And when they're playing a series against one of the top offenses in the NBA, if their defense doesn't have the ability to get stops, their offense has to produce at a high rate. And if the Bucks are without Giannis for the first couple of games, I just don't think the Bucks have enough to win more than 1 in the first 4 games. And if Giannis isn't 100%, I think it's fair to say they won't come back from a 3-1 deficit. So for that reason, I'm going with the upset and taking the Pacers to win in 6 games. And finally, let's wrap up this video by talking about maybe the toughest playoff series to predict, the 76ers versus the Knicks. Now the 76ers are easily one of the 4 best teams in the East when fully healthy, and that's all because of Joel Embiid, the reigning MVP and most dominant player in the league. And joining Embiid is Tyrese Maxey, a solid number 2 who can go out for 30 on any given night, and a supporting cast full of shooters, defenders, and all-around good pieces. If this team were fully healthy, I don't think any team other than the Celtics could beat them in a series. But let's be honest with ourselves, Joel Embiid is not 100%. I know he's playing through an injury to prove to many that he can show up in the big moments. And while I respect him for that, I have concerns for his future, especially considering his already extensive injury history. Embiid at 70% is still a great player, and someone the Knicks will have to play as they would if he were 100%. But this isn't the Bucks or Pacers defense we're talking about here. This is the New York Knicks, whose defense is the main reason why they're the 2 seed. The Knicks will force you to slow the game down and play at their pace. And if Joel Embiid and the Sixers aren't ready for that, this will be a quick series. But the underrated part of this entire series is this simple question: who's guarding Jalen Brunson? Brunson has been stellar this entire season, and I see no reason why he won't continue to be versus the Sixers. And if he can get Dante DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, and every other surrounding piece involved, again, I think it'll be a quick series. I like this Sixers team a lot, and I think the roster construction was really solid. But next year is going to be the Sixers' year. With another year under Nick Nurse's system and time for Joel Embiid to properly heal, they could very easily challenge the Celtics for the 1 seed. But for now, I think the Knicks take care of business quickly and win this series in 5 games. This year's first round is honestly unpredictable, and most of these series could go either way. So comment below what first round matchup you're most excited for, and remember to hit that like button and subscribe so you can keep up to date with playoff reactions and analysis. So with that, I'm Julian with Talkback Sports, and I'll see you next time.